Something I didn't mention about this game in the introduction is the fact that I've wanted to make this video for over a year and a half, and in that time I've sat and basked in my hatred of some of the dumbest concepts that plague the gaming medium. So it should go without saying. I'm gonna say some shit about games that many of you will like, especially VR players. So here it goes. Saints and Sinners has the best VR mechanics of any VR game I've played ever. I've played a lot of VR games on a lot of systems. For those who think I'm cherry picking, I have a PSVR, Oculus Rift S, Quest, and Quest 2, and I've easily played over 100 VR games in these past 2 years alone, and not a single one can compete with Saints and Sinners. Boneworks is cool, but the amount of walking I did versus crashing into different objects isn't even comparable. Blade and Sorcery feels good to play, but only until you're colliding with an object. Then it just feels funny. And for everyone asking about that damn Valve game, Alex controls like a magnet snapping into place, and I fucking hate it. Now I'm fully prepared to back up my argument here, but I will preface that maybe my setup for a particular game wasn't ideal. I don't have a Valve Index or knuckle controllers, but when the argument for a game's mechanics being subpar is to shell out more money, I think we've fundamentally made an error in the game making process. And quite frankly, Knuckles would have only solved the many other issues I have with Alex and Boneworks. They don't solve that pesky leg business. This game has the best movement mechanics because of a couple reasons, chiefly among them being the fact that this game sets a pace and tone. Saints and Sinners, which we will explore in more depth later, has a core gameplay loop of explore, craft, kill, repeat in a broken down, half-flooded, apocalyptic New Orleans. You're not in some neo-future utopian city with robots or some overbearing authoritarian dystopia with a resistance movement building in secret. You are alone. You're an outsider to this area, and the biggest population in the area wants to kill you, and the rest don't trust you. This game establishes very early on to take your time and tread with caution, and treat everyone like an enemy because that's how they see you. You aren't the Doomslayer, you're working with dirty bandages, metal scraps, and rotten food. Your movement is slow in this game, and by that I mean your sprint is lower than most games' walking speed. Your sprint is more of a light jog that should only be used in the most desperate of situations. Rather than give you the full freedom to move in parkour like you're Jack Cooper or a Mexican hopped up on speed, Saints and Sinners is telling you to slow down and think properly. If you try to rush through this game, you will die, and you will lose all of your resources that you've gathered up until this point. You're able to collide with objects in the world, and in a way that doesn't make you feel like a puppeteer with a lead doll. Your arms and feet collide with enough quality of life improvements to make any body type feel comfortable. Your movement isn't determined by being 2 inches higher than the game thinks you should be. It's a binary walking or crouching function, one that you don't have to physically crouch for either. Now I get it, I'm ragging on a lot of other different games here, but that's because I am incredibly biased. I've been playing VR for 4 years across all these headsets I previously listed, now including a Raw Thrills VR King Kong thing. It's not as bad as it sounds, especially for $5. Every game has something that it falters in. That's not new information, we've been seeing it a lot for the past decade. What bothers me is that this one subsection of gaming that has its own genres and unique methods of interaction always have the same problems that they fall into. Locomotion, the way you walk around, or not if you're too afraid of commitment. Collision, the way you interact with the world physically, with your appendages and your fucking knees. And controls, which buttons do what and how they end up doing it. Games will either have you take the jump to light speed or not have enough options to ever make the game feel comfortable. You're either going to be turning at the pace of a dead slug or you're going to feel like you're in a blender. Your hands face through the wall, through the ground, through the gun you want to hold, through the enemy in a combat system that wants to emphasize melee, all the while you're sliding around like it's fucking Tribes. Every VR game I've ever played to this point has at least one of these problems, with the exceptions being Beat Saber, Static, and Saints and Sinners. After the tutorial and choosing the settings you feel comfortable with, you never have to go back to the pause menu. The only time you might want to go back to the menu is to turn off the HUD, seemingly due to inspiration from some pals out east. Usually I'm a bit of a pussy when it comes to reducing the information I have in a game, but Saints and Sinners is the exception. This is a game I want to be more immersed in, but not to the point where I'd shit myself with a haptic vest, but I want to feel like I'm even more in this world than I already am. VR is extremely experimental, and it's hard to properly explain why a game feels good to play as it is, so rather than try to explain this anymore, I'll leave it at this. Saints and Sinners got AAA polish in a VR format. Rather than feeling like an indie developer making an FPS, this feels like a smooth and fleshed out shooter from Treyarch. Older Treyarch, not whatever they got going on right now. Every other game feels stiff, rushed, and poorly planned out, but this is top shelf. Yes, I've rambled this long about the controls and we're finally getting into the gameplay.